It's so remarkable. It touches on this issue of polarization that we sort of opened this discussion with. So this was an article in the Atlantic Monthly that came out this week, and it was a review of a large-scale survey that was done by political scientists. I believe they were political scientists. So it's so comical, I think. It's the conclusion to this is so comical that, well, you just have to hear it to believe it. Okay, so the first question is, what percentage of Americans are progressive activists? And the answer to that appears to be something approximating 8%. That's on the left. And there's some equivalent number on the far right. So it's 1 in 15, say, something like that. So 8% are progressive activists, and their views are even less typical. By contrast, 2/3 of Americans don't belong to the extremes, and they regard themselves in some sense as an exhausted majority. These members, this majority group, quote, share a sense of fatigue with our polarized national conversation, a willingness to be flexible in their political viewpoints, and a lack of voice in the national conversation. So that's positive, obviously, because it's a majority, but it's not so positive because the noisy radicals have got the dialogue. So now some statistics. These are fun. Well, as far as statistics go. This is the sort of fun you have when you can't drink beer. So 80% believe that political correctness is a problem in the United States. And that includes 79% of those who are under 24. So it's not young people that are driving this particularly. And then you can break it down by ethnicity and race, which isn't something that I particularly enjoy doing, but in this situation, it's necessary analytically. Because you might say, well, most people regard political correctness as a problem, but that's the oppressors that regard it as a problem. What about the people who are hypothetically dispossessed? Well, the most likely people to believe that PC, political correctness, is a problem are the minorities that are supposed to be its beneficiary. So that's pretty cool. So Asians, 82% believe it's a problem. Hispanics, 87%. American Indians, 88%. And American blacks, 75%. So now, and hypothetically, they're the target of the largesse that's part and parcel of political correctness, but they don't want it. So who does want it? Well, rich white people with postgraduate degrees. So even 30% of progressive activists think that political correctness is a problem. So that's pretty cool. But the people that are most likely to support it are precisely PC activists are rich, highly educated, and white, twice as likely to make more than $100,000 a year. Okay, so let's think about this for a minute, because it's so surreal. So one of the things I noticed about activist types on Ivy League campuses, they always have annoyed me, because, well, there's a reason for it. It's like, if you're an undergraduate at Harvard or Stanford or any of the Ivy Leagues, you're already part of the ruling class. Like, you might only be 18, but that just means you're a baby member of the ruling class. It's like 40% of Harvard graduates have a net worth of $1 million by the time they're 40. And that's a stat from 1998. So, because that's the last time I knew about those stats. So it's like you're in there already. You've already been selected. And so what it means is if you're in the upper echelons in that manner, and you're an activist, this is what you want, as far as I can tell. You want all of the privilege and power, to use the terminology that's part and parcel of this sort of dialogue. You want all of the privilege and power, and you want all the moral, what would you say? You want to accrue to yourself all the moral justification that also makes you an outstanding advocate for the oppressed. So you want both. You want to be at the top, and you want to be the voice of those at the bottom. And to me, I think, well, that's a bit much. Like, you could have one of those. Like, if you want to be an advocate for the people at the bottom, then go out there and dispense with your long-term power and privilege and go do the work. And if you want to be part of the elite, then fine. But don't be part of the elite who's advocating for the downtrodden while you're being part of the elite, because that's too much to ask for. And that's exactly what I see happening with this, is that, and so I think that's reprehensible. I don't think you get to do both of those things. So, but here's what's even more interesting, and I think this is insanely comical. So, part of the PC doctrine is that it's useful to view the world as oppressor and oppressed, depending on the group dimension, right? And that the oppressors are part of a patriarchal tyranny, and they're imposing their viewpoint on the dispossessed. Well, it turns out, according to this poll, that that's exactly what the radical leftist political correct types are doing. They're overwhelmingly white, they're overwhelmingly rich, they're overwhelmingly educated, and they're pushing forward a doctrine that the vast majority of the people who they are pushing the doctrine for, theoretically, object to. And so I think of it, if I was a postmodern neo-Marxist, I would say, well, that's the patriarchy in action. It's another form of neo-colonialism. It's what do you call that? It's benevolent patriarchy. It's the mask of benevolent patriarchy in action. We've got the wealth, we've got the education, we've got the racial status, and we know what's good for those people of color, even though they don't think so. Right. Jesus.